It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of Religions for Peace. I serve as the Executive Director of the U.S. affiliate of Religions for Peace. It's an honor to be here with my colleague from Korea, Dr. Byun, and to have so many leaders from Religions for Peace here and participating, including our Vice Chair from the U.S. and Co-President Judith Hertz from the Union for Reform Judaism. I came for the conversation and for what it is that I might learn. I think I might stay for the beauty of this place, for the food, and for the good music. Thank you, Abby and Michael. It was very lovely. I wanted to speak to you just a moment about the relationship between religious communities and the United Nations as a way of offering some brief remarks and introduction. The UN was birthed at a time at which territories and tyrants were the ruling entity of the day, and creating an entity that was made up of nation states is what made sense. The world has shifted significantly since that time in the early 1940s in which it was given shape. And now technology and trade and terrorism rule the day. Corporations, global markets, 24/7 media, social media, and non-state actors are the major elements that the UN is having to deal with. So this is no longer nation states dealing with nation states, it's nation states dealing with a whole bunch of other factors. So you can imagine that religion is just one of those elements, one of those many elements which it has to feel that it deals with. A survey by Religion Counts in 2002 titled Religion and Public Policy at the United Nations found three overarching facts about the relationship between religion and the UN. One, religion is indeed present at the UN. Number two, religion's role at the UN is unclear to many, and religions, individuals and groups at the UN do not have a unified perspective on either the issues before the UN or the appropriate role of religion at the United Nations. For a long period of time, for many years since the institution of the UN, of which religious communities were instrumental in helping it come into being, it's been imagined that there would be some sort of spiritual or religious counterpart to the UN and a deeper way in which religious communities could participate with the United Nations. 10 years after this survey, a lot of things have changed. The UN has its operational side. So for many years, religious communities have worked hand in hand with the United Nations through its many different facets of what it is that it is. In fact, they've actually established a building that's right in the hub of the complex of the United Nations, the Church Center for the UN, in which many of the religious NGOs interact with it. On the other side is the political side, and that's where it's more difficult for there to be something formal and relational with the United Nations. Religions for Peace, the organization that Dr. Lee and Dr. Byun and myself have been involved with for many years now, has been privileged to work with the UN on helping to deliver capacity of multi-religious cooperation to address problems in cooperation with different UN entities around HIV/AIDS, around conflict, around climate change, and a number of other issues. However, today in the collective human psyche, the dominating characteristic of a religiously affiliated global terrorism is the overriding paradigm. It's the thing that concerns us all. And the UN has, like many governments, like many things in the world, geared up to trying to figure out how to deal with religion and what ways to do it. And we've seen a plethora of things come to percolate in the past number of years. Russia has tried to work with UNESCO to create a religious advisory council. His Majesty King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia gave famous conferences and speeches in Mecca and Madrid and at the UN itself, and now has put a significant amount of funding behind a new center that has great promise, the King Abdullah International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue in Vienna, which promises to put 15 million euros a year in programming for interfaith work, and is a challenge to the UN Alliance of Civilizations, which has basically worked from a cultural paradigm to represent the UN's relationship to religious communities. The Philippines started the Tripartite Forum for Interreligious Cooperation for Peace, and Kazakhstan has held a conference every few years bringing together leaders of the world's religious and spiritual traditions. And then Jordan, of course, responded to the religious community's own work to try to suggest that there be a decade of interreligious and intercultural understanding by sponsoring and suggesting and now formalizing that we would have a World Interfaith Harmony Week, of which this event is meant to be honoring and a part of. And so now we permanently so each year we'll have a week in which to give focus to that. I want to end by just saying that I think that there's three different approaches that we can take in terms of considering how it is that religious communities are in relationship to the United Nations. One is to see religion as an integral part of the concept of civilizations, and this has largely been in the recent paradigm as Islam and the West. And it's what's given birth to the alliance of civilizations. The unfortunate thing here is that often religion is just seen as one small wheel in the overall sort of cultural paradigm. And the UN can too easily look at religions from a utilitarian perspective. That is, how it is that we can get something out of them in order to help get polio vaccines delivered or help to end a conflict in a particular area. The second approach would be to see religion as a subset of culture. The effort through UNESCO and so forth has been one of these sorts of means. And third and finally, and this is perhaps most important, is I want to suggest a different paradigm, which is that religions and religious bodies want to be dealt with as religious bodies per se. Religious communities and leaders are given their own mandates from their respective institutions and their scriptures and traditions, not from something that fits from within the secular rubric, or any rubric which something like a secular institution like the UN puts forth. The UN is not mandated to organize religions, and religions are not mandated to be a part of the United Nations, yet in these times both are finding that they increasingly so most work together. So initiatives like the conversation we're having here today, the initiatives that I mentioned by the governments, the initiatives that the governments are doing in coordination with the UN, such as the UN Alliance of Civilizations, and the special status that's being accorded to the new Kaisid Center in Vienna, or associated with the Saudi Arabian government, are a plethora of ways in which we can begin to flower this engagement. There won't be one singular religious and spiritual entity that relates to or is a part of or is like the United Nations, but there are many different creative avenues and doors and ways by which we can do it. And the good people that are here in this room are part of the visioning of that happening and have made it come into being when it didn't seem like it was possible in the days following the failed Millennium Summit that we spoke of last evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to our conversation together.